back and students back and people down here. The reason I was trying to use a disc that I did because I went to Allegheny East, which is a Seventh-day Adventist convention, and learned a lot. I'm a Lutheran. I went to Lutheran college. I went to St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, graduated. We're getting ready for our 35th reunion. And at the reunion, we're going to be doing basically a presentation thanking the kids who've come. And when we say kids, how old are you?
14.
You know, that's what I mean. We've had kids as young as 13 years old. And it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. What that says to us is we have a great future for my grandkids. Great future for what this world is going to be. And it's all because of the kids, and y'all are not required to do this. Y'all come freely, and y'all come showing us that y'all have hearts for your fellow man. And one of the things which is important to me is, like I say, I have grandkids, and this is one of my granddaughters, and this is her sister. And the idea is we want them to be as happy as they used to be. You know, and that's in the pot. That's my gumbo pot, and we love to cook, so we want them to be as happy. And I've been to Atlanta. Be perfectly honest, Georgia Tech was the first group of students that actually stopped here, that were down here in 2006, and they basically started me into the process of talking to people. They were passing through the neighborhood, they were doing volunteer work. They didn't stop because they were being respectful, and I called them back, and they invited me to come to a conference at Georgia Tech in 2006. So it was my first engagement to actually go and talk to people who were doing things to help us rebuild. And as y'all see at the sign that y'all stopped, the sign says something that says we want our country to love us as much as we love our country. And that basically was an angry message directed at then President Bush. And as you notice, I said Mr. Bush, and I disrespected him by calling him Mr. Bush. And I have my Obama shirt on because they're disrespecting Obama with this new depth thing. But the idea is we're not going to talk politically, but we're going to talk. When I had that sign out, it was basically, I was angry. And I was angry because we felt like we were left alone. But since that day that I put that sign up, we've been visited by people from all over the country, from all over the world, and we never feel like we're alone. The reason why I came here and stood in front of this picture, let me ask you one big favor. Just, wait, sit back. You know, this picture, I like to show people this one. This was taken by Russell Fredericks. But this showed how the lower Ninth Ward looked right after Katrina. Everything was black and white. As you see a picture of my granddaughter Shanae and a picture of my mother Joyce. Shanae was 3 years old, died 4:30 in the morning in 25 feet of water. And actually my mother died 1 o'clock in the day after the hurricane was over. And yeah, pretty eyes. But in the meantime, give me that book. My granddaughter has eyes to your color too. So this is giving you an idea. And the DVD that I was trying to put together puts together these things that I'm about to show you. During Hurricane Katrina, the water that we were facing was actually this high. And when we say we were here, we were actually trapped in the attic in this part of the house. And we didn't have an axe like this guy has to make a hole. We had to kick a hole in with our feet just to get on the outside to wind up on top of the house. And when we wound up on top of the house, we thought, well, we're safe now. But the house actually floated off its foundation. And in floating, my granddaughter was washed away in water like this. But we actually floated from here all the way to there, on the roof of the house. And a lot of people think that, well, Katrina did it, but it was helped when this barge, which actually came through the levee wall, put a hole in it and made everything around us start to float. This gives you a better picture of the barge. And when y'all were at the levee wall, y'all were actually at the same spot where the hole occurred. And this is a house that survived. There's another house right here, and my house was right here. And the barge came through and actually made this whole area. And it just didn't flood the lower Ninth Ward, it flooded all the way back to Chalmette. And while we were on the roof of the house floating, we were floating before the hurricane struck. We were fighting what is called the storm surge. And the storm surge precedes the hurricane because the hurricane pushes, and that's a picture of the hurricane, and it actually pushes the water from the beginning to the end, and this is the storm surge that we were fighting. And that storm surge actually came through and devastated this neighborhood. But it wasn't because we chose to stay here that this happened to us. We actually were going to go to Nashville, Tennessee, and we actually know what happens in a hurricane. So we decided that we were going to get on the road on Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning and drive to Nashville. But the traffic was so heavy because you had a million other people driving. And when that people started to move all at the same time, traffic stopped. So it took us 5 hours to get 30 minutes away. The normal trip from here to Baton Rouge takes an hour. It took 14 hours. The trip to Nashville would have taken much longer. And my mother was actually very sick, and she could not make the trip because we thought that she would actually perish. So we decided to come back home, and we went to the Superdome to try to get into the Superdome. And if we couldn't make it in my son's SUV, we couldn't make it standing in the long lines that were at the Superdome. So they told us to come back home because they didn't have the hospital beds and the things set up which they call special needs, so that they could take care of people like my mother. And when we came back home, we basically thought we were going to be able to go back, but we didn't get a chance to go back. We wound up being trapped here. So 4 o'clock in the morning, my brother said we have water in the house. It was shin high. He walked outside with the anticipation of breaking into the neighbor's house across the street, which he did. Went up to the 2nd floor because it was a 2-story house, but it wasn't fixed. So when he walked back in the middle of the street, how tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
Are you?
Yeah.
You look taller. But anyway, my brother is 6'8". So my brother, so when my brother walked back in the street, the water was chest high, so it was 6 feet high. The water was rising really fast. It took 23 minutes for it to really rise to the level of 25 feet. And if you can imagine, where we are standing now in this elevated house was underwater. Where we are standing now is actually the attic height. So the water rose so fast that we were able to make it to the roof thinking we would be safe. Then we wound up realizing that we weren't safe because the house was a wood frame house built differently than this house, rose off its foundation and started floating up the street. And when the house started to hit the trees, and we had oak trees all around us, like this tree here, like some of the trees you see, they started to break up. We were blessed to be able to manage to move through the streets and actually wound up hitting a tree. My granddaughter was thrown off, and it's kind of a sad thing to say that we were blessed to lose one child. We were blessed to lose my mother, but we managed to save the 5 other lives that were here. And we were actually rescued by our neighbors, which was Ernest Edwards, Antonio Guy, and Keith Rivers. And these guys used the bass boat and actually rescued people. Anybody who didn't get rescued by them that day wound up staying on the roof of the house. And going back to what I mean, on the roof of the house, staying back on the roof of the house, like these people, for 3 to 5 days without food or water. You can't drink this water. It was toxic water. You couldn't find anywhere to help. And it's ironic, I thought about this today, that helicopter actually flies. The helicopters were flying across and people weren't being helped. The National Guards were actually out here and they weren't moving to help people because they didn't get the order to go to do those kind of things. So you had all these situations, but Katrina was a devastating storm, but nobody knew how bad it was going to be. You could talk about New Orleans being below sea level, but we are in a section of the city that doesn't flood when it floods in other parts of the city. And what I mean by flood is we have these rainstorms which y'all were really blessed to not have to come through. In the last week, neighborhoods were having 6 feet of water because of the rain. The water was so strong that it actually broke the foundations of the the interstate. And this is going to Causeway. And these are little boats, but they're big boats compared to this 18-wheeler and this van. It was so devastating that it created so much damage. But like I say, for us, it wasn't about damage. It wasn't about us staying here. It wasn't about us not respecting the hurricane. It was about the devastation that we had no idea would actually come through here. And we wound up being here not by choice but by circumstances, and those circumstances changed a lot of what happened. We had a lot of people who were unprepared to leave. We were prepared to leave. You had a lot of people who could not leave. We were prepared to leave. And you had a lot of people who wound up being stuck. And those were the ones that you saw the horror stories of what happened at the Superdome or what happened at the convention center, because they weren't prepared to deal with what Katrina brought here.